was my wife. You Wookiee sack of I want to thank my lovely wife.
I once loved a man, loved him so deeply that just thinking about him made it hard to breathe. But perhaps I chose to lose myself in the process. At 83, Harrison Ford finally broke the wall of silence he had carried for more than half a century. He admitted a secret he had never revealed before: a same-sex love from his youth, a love that quietly shaped his entire career, personality, and 3 marriages. Scandals such as the 3-month affair with Carrie Fisher, marriages that seemed happy but fell apart, all stemmed from a truth Ford was forced to bury in order to survive Hollywood. And everything began with a man Harrison Ford once loved so deeply, yet could never walk to the end of the road with. Fasten your seatbelt, because the story behind that secret would twist both his career and his life in ways no one ever expected. Let's begin. 1. If that day I had chosen him, my entire life would have been different. I might have been happier, but Hollywood would have burned me alive instantly. Those were the first words Harrison Fordman spoke, his voice hoarse, as if the sentence had been trapped in his throat for over 50 years. He sat quietly inside the old wooden room of his ranch in the far west, where only the sound of wind brushing through the window carried the sighs of his past. His gaze drifted far away into a hazy sky, the place where he had buried the truest part of himself his whole life. In 1963, before becoming a Hollywood icon, Harrison Fordman was just a young man who had barely stepped into a film studio, doing everything from carrying water, adjusting props, to working as a carpenter to pay rent. And in that chaotic, noisy place, he met Elias Monroe, the man who would change his entire life. Elias was a talented, handsome young actor considered a rising star of Hollywood. He walked into Fordman's life so gently that Fordman didn't even notice it was the beginning of a beautiful tragedy. They met on a rainy afternoon when Fordman was struggling with a fake wooden wall, and Elias stepped in, took the hammer from his hand, and said, "You work like you're rebuilding all of Hollywood yourself." That light remark created an invisible thread between them. From then on, Elias always found excuses to be near him, asking questions, bringing him coffee, talking about work. Fordman, confident in front of a camera, suddenly became awkward whenever Elias was close. Every time Elias looked at him, Fordman felt his heart want to run, but his feet refused to move. They never needed to confess anything. The feelings blossoming between them were as clear as stage lights. One night, the two sat on the roof of the studio watching Los Angeles glow below. Elias quietly said, "If Hollywood accepted this, I would hold your hand without fear." Fordman remained silent, because he knew Hollywood would never allow their love. That night, they kissed, a trembling but fierce kiss, marking the beginning of a deep love Fordman would never forget. But Hollywood in the 60s was a place where truth was hidden and sexuality had to fit a mold. Even one rumor about same-sex affection was enough to destroy a career, void contracts, and have the press shred one's reputation. Elias understood that best. One heavy evening, he said, "If people find out about us, neither of us will survive." And then the inevitable happened. In 1967, Fordman received his first major role. But the price was an image-strong, masculine, a model man, someone allowed to love only women. The studio was blunt. The audience must dream of you. If there are any rumors, you're finished. When Fordman told Elias, he simply sighed. "I knew this day would come. Maybe I'm not part of the life Hollywood wants you to have." Those words hurt like being stripped bare because they were true. With no choice, Harrison Fordman buried his feelings and married Margaret Hale, a gentle girl from the makeup department who genuinely loved him, unaware that his heart belonged elsewhere. The wedding was rushed. Fordman stood beside the bride but kept searching the crowd for Elias's silhouette, even though deep down he knew Elias wouldn't come. On their wedding night, Margaret slept peacefully in the room, while Fordman sat by the window listening to the rain like it was knocking on his chest. From that moment, he knew he had stepped into a lifelong role he never wanted to play. To avoid facing the truth, he drowned himself in work. He took every role, stayed on set from morning to night, traveled constantly. He avoided Margaret's touch, her hugs, even family dinners, where she looked at him with worry. She once whispered, "Are you okay?" He only shook his head. He couldn't bring himself to tell her that his heart was somewhere she could never reach. On lonely nights, he opened a drawer containing Elias's photo. He stared at it for a long time, as if trying to hold on to his scent, his smile, the eyes of the only man he ever loved. That marriage lasted nearly 10 suffocating years, filled with silence, with nights that felt endlessly tight around his chest. Fordman lived like a shadow, fulfilling the role of a husband, though his heart had never been there. And then in 1976, when he thought life would continue drifting like that, a new project changed everything. He set foot on the set of Star Trails, a film no one expected to become a phenomenon. There he met Carrie Loring, a young woman with shining eyes and a smile that mixed mischief with deep sadness. With just one look, Fordman felt his heart tighten painfully. Not because she was Carrie, but because she looked 90% like Elias. Her eyes, her nose, the way she tilted her head. Everything mirrored the man he had once desperately loved. In that moment, the memories he thought had turned to ash burst into flames again, and the true tragedy of his life began. 2. I betrayed my wife, but I never loved that woman. I only loved the face she unknowingly borrowed from someone else. When Harrison Fordman said that his whole body seemed to sink, his voice wasn't loud yet, the air in the small room grew thick. Old memories once thought to have vanished rushed back sharp and painfully clear. The Star Trails set that year was noisy, scorching, and chaotic like every Hollywood production, but for Fordman, the moment he saw Carrie Loring, all surrounding sounds disappeared. She walked in laughing at a colleague's joke, and just as the light hit her face, he froze. She looked so much like Elias that he felt as if his past was mocking him. Every angle of her face, every faint frown, even the way she unconsciously pressed her lips together while listening, all of it were things he had once loved deeply in the first man of his life. His heart beat unreasonably fast, not because she was beautiful, but because she made him remember Elias in a way he had spent years trying to forget. Part of him was terrified, but another part longed to look again, to hear that voice again, to stand just a little closer, only to confirm that his memory wasn't deceiving him. On the very first evening the whole crew went out for drinks after work, Carrie sat beside him and casually told stories about her family, about playful teasing from co-stars, about how she always felt not good enough. Fordman stayed silent and listened, but every word she spoke sent him spiraling into an old dream where Elias once sat beside him, just like that, sharing meaningless stories to ease his own nerves. She didn't know it, but every gesture, every smile, every tilt of her head stabbed into a wound he thought had already healed. One day after an exhausting shoot, Carrie ran after him and half-teasingly asked, "Why do you keep looking at me like you've known me for a long time?" Fordman couldn't answer. How could he? How could he tell her he saw someone else in her? Someone she didn't even know existed. And then, exactly as he had tried to avoid, they kissed. A kiss that didn't belong to the present, but to another lifetime. It wasn't a connection between Harrison and Carrie. It was a fragile thread between Harrison and Elias that he desperately wanted to hold on to. That was why the affair exploded so intensely that Carrie later called it a 3-month one-night stand, 3 long months burning like one endless night where 2 lost souls clung to each other for a bit of warmth. During those 3 months, they were almost inseparable. Carrie loved him with all the passion of youth, while Harrison was dragged into a whirlwind of emotions he couldn't control. He wanted to be near her because she made him believe that the memory of Elias had never died. Sometimes when Carrie fell asleep on his shoulder, he stroked her hair gently, but tears gathered in his eyes. Not because of Carrie, but because he felt himself losing who he was all over again. Carrie didn't understand any of that. She only saw a lonely man, strong yet fragile, gentle yet closed off. She loved him enough to believe their feelings could become something bigger. But then filming wrapped. The lights went out. The laughter, the scenes, the atmosphere that made Fordman feel like he was reliving the past, all of it vanished. One afternoon, he watched Carrie chatting with someone else. She was laughing brightly, radiating life. This time, he no longer saw Elias in her. No sadness, no depth, no gentle mannerisms he once adored in Elias. She was only Carrie Young, clumsy, impulsive, sometimes too blunt, completely different from the man who had once stepped into his heart. In that moment, Fordman realized he had never truly loved Carrie. He had only loved the shadow she carried. And that was cruel. Cruel to Carrie, cruel to himself, and cruel to Elias. So he ended it. Abruptly, brutally. Carrie probably never understood how a man who once looked at her like she was his entire world could turn away coldly. She was heartbroken, but Fordman suffered in a different way, the suffering of someone who finally understood he had spent his whole life chasing a ghost. But the scandal wouldn't let him go. Just weeks later, rumors spread across Hollywood, the married star cheating with a 19-year-old actress. Fordman's marriage falling apart. Carrie was just a temporary fling. Rumors sliced through his reputation and private life like knives. No one knew the truth. No one knew he didn't love Carrie, but a face she unintentionally mirrored. No one knew why he had left her so suddenly. That scandal pushed his career down another path, darker, harsher. But it wasn't his final tragedy. What awaited him wasn't tabloid gossip, but the complete collapse of the marriage he thought would bring peace. A marriage destroyed by a single photograph. And that was when the true darkness of his life began. 3. I thought I had buried the past. But the truth is, the past merely slept, waiting for the day it could tear my life apart once more. That was how Harrison Fordman began. When speaking of his second marriage, a marriage he said was so beautiful, I believed it would save me. After leaving his first marriage with its painful memories and the reckless affair with Carrie Loring, Fordman met Melissa Hartwell, a talented, calm screenwriter with a heart big enough to embrace a man already full of scars. Melissa wasn't like Margaret. She was more intuitive, deeper, and importantly, she never tried to fix him. With Melissa, he wasn't a screen hero or a Hollywood icon. He was simply Harrison, a man sometimes irritable, sometimes silent, sometimes lost in his own thoughts. Her serenity pulled him out of the chaos he had lived in for so long. They built their life in the gentlest way, cooking breakfast together in the mornings, Weekend picnics, nights lying beside each other reading scripts under warm yellow lamps. For the first time, Fordman felt he was living the ordinary life he had longed for in his youth. They had children, built a family, and Melissa became the rare anchor that made him believe his heart could heal. For a long time, Fordman almost convinced himself that the memory of Elias, the first and only man he ever loved, had faded into shadow. He locked it away, buried in a corner he believed no one would ever reach. Melissa didn't know, and he didn't want her to know. Not out of shame, but from fear. Fear that the truth would collapse everything they had built. But life has strange ways of being cruel. And the cruelest moment came on a completely ordinary day. That day, Melissa was cleaning her husband's office. It was just a habit she liked, organizing his desk, his books, and the memory boxes he kept scattered in corners. While pulling out a worn, nearly torn box, the lid suddenly came loose. A photograph slipped out and fell face down onto the floor. When Melissa bent down and turned it over, everything around her seemed to freeze. In the photo was a young man with deep eyes, a face sharp yet sorrowful, and a gaze toward the camera filled with a kind of love that needed no words. Anyone could see it. That was the gaze someone reserves only for the person they love. What stunned Melissa wasn't the man's beauty, but the undeniable feeling that her husband had once loved him with a love nothing could replace. When Fordman returned home, he saw the photo on the table, no longer hidden in his secret box. Melissa stood beside it, hands hung loosely, her face neither angry nor tearful, only filled with deep sadness. That sadness struck Fordman still, because he knew he could not lie. He had no excuse left to offer. She asked softly, "Who is this man?" "In your heart." Fordman didn't answer. His silence was the most painful confession. From that day, their marriage began to crack, not from anger, but from a sorrow too deep to name. Melissa didn't blame him or explode in jealousy. She simply folded into herself as if searching for a place in her own life where she still belonged. They still ate dinner together but no longer talked much, still slept in the same room but with their backs turned, still shared parenting duties, but every gesture became awkward, careful, as if both were trying to protect themselves from something too heavy to face. The quieter Melissa became, the more guilty Fordman felt. Her love was too beautiful, too pure, too gentle. But deep inside, there was still a corner of his heart no one, not even she, could enter. And that was what hurt her more than any betrayal. One day before leaving the house, Melissa said softly, "I can forgive everything, Harrison. But I cannot spend my whole life beside a heart I know I will never reach." In that moment, Fordman understood their marriage could not be saved. They separated quietly, no arguments, no blame, just two good people who loved each other in their own way but could not be happy together. That marriage ended in sadness, leaving Fordman with a hollow space so large he thought he would live the rest of his life with that loneliness. But he was wrong, because the woman who appeared afterward gently, quietly brought Fordman something he had never known before: true peace. And from that moment, his life stepped into a chapter no one could have imagined. 4. I've lived my whole life like someone constantly running away. Only when I met her did I understand there are people who don't ask you to forget them. At an age when most men have already stepped away from the limelight, Harrison Fordman was still busy with projects, film sets, and new faces. But deep inside, he had reached a different kind of exhaustion. Tired of explaining, tired of hiding, tired of pretending he was fine. His second marriage had collapsed, and the man he once loved lived only in the nights when memories returned like shadows. Fordman had nearly accepted that the rest of his life would be nothing but a long stretch of emptiness. Then Callista Fairheart appeared, not loud, not dramatic, not like the fated encounters in movies, but she became the most important turning point of his life. They met at a small party after a film premiere. Fordman was already a seasoned star, while Callista was an actress past her prime, living more slowly now, appearing less in front of cameras. She stood in a corner of the room holding a glass of wine, listening more than speaking. Occasionally, she laughed softly, just polite enough, just distant enough. Fordman noticed that, and he recognized it instantly. She too was someone tired of playing roles in real life. When they were introduced, Callista didn't seem excited to meet a silver screen legend, nor did she eagerly ask for a photo or autograph. She simply shook his hand, looked him directly in the eyes, and asked, "I know you've played many roles, but right now, which one are you?" That simple question surprised Fordman. For years, people had only asked about his characters, his acting techniques, his scenes. No one had ever asked, "Who are you right now?" in such a gentle yet straightforward way. From that day on, they began talking more. Not in a flirtatious way, not in sweet words, but through long conversations about things almost no one asked a man like Fordman. What it feels like to come home and not want to turn on the lights. What it feels like to stand on a movie set praised by the whole world, yet fear that one day people will discover you're just an empty shell. What it feels like when there's a corner of your heart you can never explain to anyone. The most special thing about Callista was she never asked about his past yet. She wasn't afraid of the darkness she saw in his eyes. She didn't pry, didn't demand he tell her everything, didn't force any confession. She simply sat beside him, ready to listen if he wanted to speak, and staying silent with him if he just wanted to sit there and do nothing. For the first time, Fordman didn't feel judged. In his 2 previous marriages, despite each woman loving him in her own way, there was always something similar. They wanted to understand everything, to touch every dark corner inside him, to save him from his past. But Callista was different. She accepted that some doors in a person's heart were never meant to be opened. "You don't need to tell me. I'm still here," she once said on an evening when they sat on the front steps watching the streetlights flicker. With Callista, Fordman didn't need to act anymore. He could be grumpy without apologizing, silent for hours without explaining, admit he was tired without being judged as weak. For the first time in his life, he felt he could remain entirely himself without being pulled away from that small, safe space. The man from his past, Elias, was still there in memories in the rare nights when the past resurfaced. But there was one major difference. Elias was no longer an open wound. He was a healed scar. Whenever memories rose, Fordman no longer ran. He simply looked at them, breathed deeply, then turned to see Callista beside him reading a book or falling asleep with her glasses still on. She didn't replace Elias. No one could. But Callista stood in an entirely different place, a life partner, someone who didn't ask him to erase anyone from his past, but quietly created a new sky where he could live the rest of his life without torment. One day, after many years together, Fordman suddenly asked, "You never get curious about the things I don't tell you?" Callista smiled. "Of course I do, but I respect the things you choose to protect. I don't need to know everything in order to love you." Her answer almost made Fordman cry. His whole life he had met people who wanted to know everything to feel secure. But she was the opposite. She felt secure even without knowing it all. Because of that, for the first time in many years, Fordman chose to open a piece of his past. Not as a confession, but as a final, honest gift for the woman who had walked beside him in quiet companionship. He told Callista about Elias, about his first marriage built as a facade, about how he had used a young woman to hold on to the shadow of a man, about the photo that destroyed his second marriage. He told her with a vague fear that once she heard everything, she would look at him differently, with judgment, with disappointment, with distance. But when he finished, the room held only the ticking of a clock. Callista sat there quietly for a few seconds, then gently took his hand. "I think," she said slowly, "a person can carry many kinds of love inside them. I don't see you as someone terrible. I see someone who had to live too long without being himself. I'm here, not to judge who you loved. I'm here to walk with you from this moment forward." It was one of the rare times Harrison Fordman cried, not from pain, but from liberation. From that day on, the memory of Elias was no longer a shameful secret hidden in an old box. It became a part of his life he could speak of without trembling. Callista wasn't jealous of the past, nor of a man long gone, nor of the life he lived before her. She understood that without all those things, the man sitting beside her today wouldn't exist. And that is why at 83, when many believed he had nothing left to say, Harrison Fordman chose to reveal everything. Not to shock, not to justify, but to put an end to a life spent running. Because he knew that for the first time in his long life, filled with roles, he had someone beside him who didn't love the hero, didn't love the legend, but loved the real man behind all the lights. And for someone like Harrison Fordman, that was the long-delayed, but truest freedom. The life of Harrison Fordman, after all, is not the story of a Hollywood star, but the story of a human being who lived too long under the spotlight and forgot that darkness, too, deserves to be accepted. From a first love torn apart, 2 broken marriages, to a late encounter with the woman who freed him from himself. Everything formed a journey full of pain, but also full of hope. At 83, he looks back with eyes that hide nothing. He no longer regrets loving, no longer feels ashamed of his shadows, and no longer fears judgment. Because in the end, every human being deserves a place to return to, a safe place to say the things they never dared speak. And Harrison Fordman found that place in the arms of Callista Fairheart. A life that long, perhaps this is the first time he has truly been free. If this story touched your heart, please like the video so we can continue bringing unseen stories to light. Share so more people can understand that behind the spotlight, everyone carries their secrets and pain. And don't forget to comment below. What do you think gave Harrison Fordman the courage to say everything at 83? See you in the next stories, where we will continue exploring the most beautiful and painful hidden corners of people who seem as if they could never fall. Thank you for watching until the end.